welcome back to Momming Heart with Lauren. I want to start today by saying thank you for tuning in and sharing a little bit of your time with me. So, I got an overwhelming response to talk about teenage daughters. Now, that's the one I should have led with dun dun dun. If you know, you know. But yeah, so let's get into this. Um, Background on me, I think I already told you guys, but I have a 14-year-old. Okay. Okay. Um, which, you know, it's kind of like a crazy thing. We start with these little sweet humans, right? These little sweet baby girls, and they're kind and cuddly and caring, and they want to do everything you do, and they want to look like you, and they want to do things you do. And then somewhere around like 10, 11, it's like, what? Who is this person? I'm joking, but I'm not, okay? If you know, again, you know, right? Um, so I'm gonna just touch on a little bit of my experience without kind of telling too much. I don't want to, embarrass my 14-year-old, which, you kind of got to walk on eggshells with those teenagers. But I do want to give you guys some tools that, kind of worked for me. All right. So, to put things kind of in perspective, um, yeah, this momming stuff, like, there's no handbook, none. And quite frankly, you know, in your head, if you had like an enjoyable childhood or, you know, a decent childhood, you're like, okay, well, I'm just gonna kind of implement these same things. Wrong, wrong. Because every kid is different. Every kid is different. So how you mother, how you parent has to change, right? So if your kid is nothing like you were as a kid, how you were parented will probably not work. All right. So, I think like my biggest like what moment um with my 14-year-old growing up was I could have sworn, or like I thought in my head that, like, the defiance and like the attitudes and like the the hormonal stuff was like, high school. Like that was when it got rough. And I was so wrong. So wrong. Um, it's totally middle school. Middle school is rough. Rough. Um, I think as adults we like cancel that out. Like I'm like, what? Was I going through this in middle school? And honestly, I probably was, but I do not remember, probably because it's such a traumatizing time, right? So, middle school, man, middle school. So, I think when stuff got really kind of rocky for us was genuinely middle school. Um, which I mean, when you put it in play, I guess that is when, your hormones start fluctuating. And with that fluctuation comes a lot of different personality traits you start kicking out. So, yeah. And then, let's add into the equation. Times are different. These are not the same times we were growing up in. There are so many other factors that our girls have to deal with, and we kind of got to take that into account. So I think it's around middle school, they're trying to find themselves. They're trying to figure out who they are, who they want to be. Okay. And so trying to figure out who they want to be, they take on a lot of different friend groups, right? So in trying to find themselves out, they're listening and they're taking in information and habits and traits of all these different people because this is their most impressionable time. Okay. So as a parent, you're sitting there like, who are you? This is not the same person I knew, right? But it really isn't, which, if you're doing parenting right, it shouldn't be, right? They should find their own selves. They should find their own voice. They should try new things. They should see what works for them. They should see what doesn't. Um, and what better time to do it? What better time to do trial and error than middle school? Um, so yeah. So um, for us, right, middle school was catty, catty. When you have a little girl and they want to fit in, they want to have these friends, um, you get a lot of the, oh, I don't like her because of this, or, well, she's dating, da da da, dating, um, or, well, da 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 likes her, so I don't like her. Just a lot of ridiculousness, right? Um, but at that age, they care, right? It's so great to be an adult, and actually some adults care, whether they fit in places and whether they are liked by certain people. But as an adult, a lot of times we do grow out of that. Um, but as a preteen, right, it's everything. It's everything to them. How they're perceived by their peers is everything. So when there is any type of discord or any type of issues that arise at school, they bring it home. And we're not with them all the time. We don't know what's going on. Um, so we're trying to navigate their emotions and their mood changes and their mood swings kind of in the dark. Like we're feeling for some type of, oh, okay, that's what's wrong. Let me fix it. But the I think the challenging part about being a mom to a teenage or preteen girl is we can't fix it. We can't fix it. For one, we can't go to school and be like, well, you're gonna like my daughter. Although we want to. Let's be clear. There were a couple times I wanted to be like, but we can't. We can't. We have to, one, make them feel comfortable enough to share these experiences with us, right? Um, so like I'm saying, like these things seem so minuscule to me, right? And I'm one of those people that like, if it's something that's so simple, it's so easy for me to be like, oh girl, get over it. Like, who cares? You're not gonna be friends with them next year anyway, right? Because I'm an adult and I know that, okay? But this is a kid and they have no clue. To them, this is it. This is end all be all, right? So you kind of have to take yourself into that realm and be like, oh, and you know what? I understand that this is hurtful, that blah, blah, blah would say this about you. But you're not that, right? Or you know that that's not true. And you have to give them age appropriate solutions. Okay. And kind of like one of the best tools, which I don't think our parents had, what I mean, they literally didn't have, is at the internet. Literally the internet, right? So since there is no handbook and since there is no place you can really be like, you know, what should I do? The internet gives so many, like, just helpful tools, like different articles and um, different tips on how to talk to your preteen slash teenager. So, um, but me turning off my adult hat and literally putting myself in her shoes helped me so much with relating to her and with making her feel comfortable with me enough to tell me exactly what was going on, because that's really half the battle. If you don't know, you cannot be of assistance. And unfortunately, if your child does not feel comfortable enough with you, you're not gonna know. You're not gonna know. So, understanding what's going on, step one. And then step two is literally fighting yourself not to interject, right? So, as a mother, especially, we want to protect our kids from feeling hurt, from feeling sad, from feeling, um, honestly, any type of emotion other than happy, right? I don't want it to happen to them. But the reality of it is it definitely happens, okay? And the best thing we can do is give them the appropriate tools to work through those emotions themselves, right? Because we are raising adults. So we want them to be able to work through these things and come up with their own solutions. And at that age, it definitely gives them a sense of self reliance, like self awareness, self, self, a sense of self, right? Like, I did that. Like, it's a rewarding experience, which understandably so. I think that one thing we battle with as mothers dealing with teenage daughters is that sense of who's the boss, right? So, like, who's the boss? So, obviously, the adult is in charge, but as they get to growing and those hormones get to going, right, they get a little confused, okay? So, um, the thing that I've been working on, because for me, okay, and this is like, again, I'm just being as transparent as I can be. Um, when I was growing up, it was very regimented. So, like, I did the dishes every night. I cleaned the bathroom every Saturday, um, top to bottom, ceiling to floorboards, right? Um, and for me, growing up, I remember thinking, like, this is not fair. Like, this isn't fair. Why am I doing all of this work? This is not fair. So, when I grew up and became a mother, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to have her do that. And it's biting me in the butt as a teenager. Um, that structure is so necessary. So necessary. Just to give them a sense of responsibility, right? When you're the one giving the orders, right? It leaves that clear distinction. Okay. Um, let's go to that age old don't be your kid's friend. right? Such a fine line, because you have to actually be friendly. You have to have that type of relationship to gather certain information, right? Because one thing that I've seen, or one thing that I saw, especially growing up, was, those parents that were like super strict, and it was like, they didn't know nothing their kids were doing. Like, not a thing. And they were doing the most. So I knew that when I became a parent, that was not what I wanted. I did want my child to be able to feel comfortable enough to speak to me and to let me know what's going on, and to, share certain things, so that when they go through it, I can help direct them versus their peers, because your peers will lead you astray, right? And kids don't get that, which when I was a kid, I didn't get that. But as a mother, that's something I definitely do not want my child to do. Okay? So, being their friend, right, allows you certain information, but it also blurs that line of, when you tell them to do something, them actively getting up to do it, right? Everything is more of a discussion, versus, I know when I was growing up, if my mom said to go do something, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm about to go do it now. Which, that ties back into, times have changed. Times have changed. And either you're going to change with them and foster a healthy relationship, or you're going to constantly be at war. Personally, I chose flexibility. Okay? So, with that being said, it definitely doesn't look like parenting back in the day. It looks a lot different. I think I literally had to deprogram myself of what's supposed to be like this, and it's supposed to go like this, and you know um no, they're not supposed to say anything back to me, and no, that's unacceptable. And it was hard, right? It was so hard, because it's stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, I would never say that to my mother, or oh my gosh, I would never do that, or oh my gosh, I would never. But once I was able to remove that and really put into play that things are different, things are different with media, with social media, with all these outside influences. Our kids have voices, right? Um, we really didn't. We came from a generation of, I tell you to do something, you do it, and you do it quietly, you don't talk back. Our kids are of a, well, why? Why? Right? You thought you got over it when they were toddlers, you didn't. Now they want to know why, or, well, this doesn't make sense because da 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 da. It's always a discussion, right? And quite frankly, once I was able to remove that, like, oh, well, that's so disrespectful, because it really isn't. It really isn't. Like, I kind of want my kid to be able to voice herself and use her voice and advocate for what she believes in. That's a good thing. It really changed the dynamics of our relationship for the better. For the better. It's so easy to be snappy and like, well, because I said, or because don't say that to me, or don't da da da. Which some scenarios, don't get me wrong, require that. Okay, I'm not above it, but that's really a minor amount of the scenarios, and that's what I learned. I was giving that mentality to everything, and it's like, why? Why am I making my life harder? Why am I doing this to myself? So I literally just had to meet her in a different place, right? So if it's why, then I'm giving an explanation. Well, because da 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 da. And it's like that because da 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 da. And that's that way because da 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 da. Literally breaking things down all the way. And in those moments, I was actually realizing like these are like super teachable moments, like where I would have normally been like, no, because I said. And she would have been like, no, 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 no. It just would have escalated, right? Just answering, right? Answering and like giving logical responses. And then in those moments, not only did I keep the conversation smooth, something was learned, right? So it's really a matter of changing the narrative we already have in our head of how things are supposed to go. Because one, every kid is different. Every kid is different because if you are like that parent who has a child that never talks back and you tell them to do something, they pop up and go do it, like kudos, man, kudos. I applaud you. Just from what I've been seeing though, that's just not the kids of today, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just different. Very much different than what we're used to. Now, I know I touched on this in a previous video, but one thing that I definitely took advantage of was when things were really rough. I definitely got her involved in therapy. Um, I got her involved in going to see a psychiatrist. I literally armed her with whatever tool I could because there was a time where she just wasn't talking to me and there was nothing that I could do that would change that. It was a point where I was literally public enemy number one. She wanted nothing to do with me. Anything I said, it was a complete opposite. So I had to find her somebody to talk to. I had to allow her to get those feelings out. I had to allow her to express herself. I had to allow her a safe space for her to do so. And honestly, whatever that may look like, because around that same time, it was, she was more comfortable with my mom. So, you know what? Okay. Something happened. I'd be like, okay, we gonna talk about no. No. Or whenever I'd give her information, well, you don't understand. Okay. All right. Well, you wanna go see Nene? Okay. And she would literally, I mean, spill it. Like, just give her all the details. And I'm like, well, what is she doing that I'm not doing? And honestly, at that point in time, nothing. It was just, she wasn't rocking with me. And I had to take my feelings out of the equation because it's hurtful. Don't get me wrong, it's hurtful. But I had to remove my feelings and let her express herself where she felt safe, where she felt comfortable, where she wanted to, right? And it just wasn't with me at that time. I think that as long as we keep showing up, and that's like an ongoing trend, but keep showing up and giving them the space they need, the people they need, the tools they need, they eventually grow out of it. And again, I can only speak from my own experience. So that's what it was for me. I just stayed the course And it was a bumpy course, but I stayed the course. I just kept showing up in love, right? Because that's important. That's important because it's hard. It's hard when you have your kid, you know, literally like not liking you at all, like dogging you some days, literally, to show up in love. But you got to just keep showing up in love, right? And letting them know that, okay, well, and you ain't got to like me. I love you anyway. Okay, right, yep, and you don't got, nope, okay, and you don't got to do, but I love you anyway. That is big. That is very big. Um, Another thing that really, I think, helped our relationship, which was really hard for me, like really hard for me. So if you're like really hard for me, is apologizing even when you weren't wrong, right? So I'm big on accountability. Huge. Accountability is huge in my house. But I kind of saw that like I'm asking you to take accountability, right? In these different areas. I'm trying to get her to take accountability. And she's like, well, no, da da da. And I'm like, well, why is this girl not taking accountability? Like, you're clearly doing this wrong, or you clearly did this wrong. Just apologize. And then I had to take a look at myself, and it's like, why I'm not apologizing to her? And it was not necessarily something I felt I was doing wrong, but it was something that hurt her. Okay? So if it hurt her, then I need to apologize, because that's accountability, right? It's a two-way street. So if she's looking at you and she's, you know, clearly verbalizing, you know, something you did that upset her, and you don't feel like you did anything wrong, and you're not taking that step to apologize, then why would she apologize to you? Even if she knows she did something wrong to you. Right? So me biting my lip and being like, okay, I apologize. I see that hurt you, and that was never my intentions. I apologize. Game changer. Game changer. Because truth be told, I don't want anything I do or say to hurt my child. Okay? And as children, well, we know that their brains aren't fully developed. So concepts don't fully register sometimes. Or, you know, something you may say that you felt was helpful, they may have interpreted wrong. And quite frankly, a conversation is only as good as the other person's perception of what you're saying. So that little tweak has really helped just foster a healthy conversation flow between the two of us. Because, I mean, as you know, one small thing can turn into a blow up, which turns into y'all aren't talking for a couple days, which turns into the next time something happens, it's another big, like, it's really like a chain reaction. The key is nipping it before it gets there. And that little tiny thing has stopped so many blow-ups. So many. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is, as mothers, right? We have these babies. We look at them and we see all the possibilities. We see literally the world if they want it. We look at our kid and we know that they can do whatever. We have to let them do whatever they want to do. We have to remove any preconceived ideas of what we expect them to do, right? Because the more we cram things down their throat, the more they resent us, right? So when it comes to extracurriculars, when it comes to what they think they want to do with their future, because quite frankly, teenagers, they really don't know what they want to do. They don't. But when we force things on them, it sets in their head they don't want to do that. um, I've learned that when I allow her to flow, right? When I allow her to be her, when I allow her to make her own decisions, things just flow so much better. So much better. I know a big thing in my house was wardrobe, right? So, um, if your kid is in APS, then you know they got really lax, okay, on what they allow the kids to wear to school, um, which really created a problem because here I am saying, well, no, you can't wear that. And she's like, oh, well, people wear this all the time. Oh, no, people have their stomachs out. No, all the girls. I'm like, well, isn't it in the dress code that you can't? She's like, oh, no, no one gets dress coded. I'm like, well, now I have to be the big bad guy and be like, well, you ain't wearing it. But really, they really do all have their stomachs out. I mean, picking these kids up, I'm like, oh, interesting. Oh, wow, we would have been sent home. Um, so that was like a big thing. Like everybody, I'm like, oh my gosh, where do you think you're wearing that? You can't. No, you're not wearing that to school. Da da da. Um, but I really had to just be like, okay, well, how about this? I guess that's what you're wearing, and if you do get dress coded, I won't be coming to pick you up. Okay, so you're gonna sit in the office all day because that's what you're wearing. So it's your choice, right? But understand that that is not what you're supposed to wear. And if you do get sent home, there are consequences. You put the ball in their court. Okay. I think one thing we totally have to do is you cannot equate a kid, let me take that back, a teenager, right? Their choices are their choices. At that age, their choices are their choices. Because at this point, we've given them really love, guidance, knowledge. We've equipped them with everything, um, all the basics, all the cores, all the fundamentals, right? So at this point, their choices are their choices, okay? And we have to allow them to make them. So as a people, okay, we have to stop equating a teenager's choices, if poor or if in bad decision making or poor decision making. We can't equate that with bad parenting because at that point, a lot of times they don't equate. There's no relation really. Like if your teenager decides this is what I'm wearing, then hey, that's your choice, right? I told you don't wear it. The school told you don't wear it. But if that's what you want to wear, understand that there are consequences if you get caught, right? Um, but that all goes into, you know, you're raising adults. You're raising adults. And sometimes they do need to understand that, yeah, I can do this, or yeah, I can make this decision, or yeah, I can um, do this against, knowing it's against what I'm supposed to do. But if I do, this could happen. That's real life, right? There are laws, right? And we know we're not supposed to do certain stuff that we still do, and we're taking that risk. But it's the same thing with a teenager. I think that growing up is just probably um, the most chaotic thing a girl goes through. You're dealing with yourself, you're dealing with outside factors, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends. Um, you're dealing with teachers, you're dealing with coaches, you're dealing with a lot. They're dealing with a lot. So, the thing I like to do is when I'm in that, like, oh my gosh, she's driving me crazy, I try to put myself in her shoes, right? Because a lot of times it has nothing to do with you. She ain't mad at you. She really don't even got an attitude with you. She has an attitude with everything else going on. She's mad at her boyfriend. She's mad at her friend. She's mad at her coach that just yelled at her. She's mad at that teacher that gave her a C that she didn't think she deserved. She's mad at all of these other things. But when you're the closest one to her, it gets directed at you. So being able to not take things personal, it changes a lot. It allows you to take your feelings out of it and just help your baby. Because sometimes, even when they're being mean, even when they're being nasty, even when they're being just crazy to you, all they really want is you to hug them and let them know everything's going to be okay. So, that was a lot. It was an earful. And this is definitely a topic I want to revisit because I, in no way, shape, or form, covered everything. But to take away, I just really want to stress showing up and being there. Because when they are screaming at the top of their lungs, when they are doing all of that, when they are refusing to do something you told them to do, remember that's still your baby. And just as she was once one sweet little bundle of joy, this too, this phase will pass. But when you're able to take your hurt feelings out of it, it makes this phase so much smoother. All right, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. This was another session with Mommy with Lauren, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.